Dawn shivered through the high windows, pale and cold, slicing ribbons of blue across the factory floor. I stood where the rubber mats curled at the conveyor's edge, staring at the time-worn clock above the door as if I could will it backward. My hair smelled like burnt oil, my nails ground into darkness by endless shifts. The shift manager, Vincent, shuffled over with a clipboard, fatigue souring his scowl. Matthew. Chef's dream not working out, eh? His sarcasm cut as he ripped the sheet from his pad. We're scaling back, you're out, take your aprons to HR. I knew I'd felt it in the tension all week, a shift in the foreman's eyes. Still the words strung, older wounds pressed raw. I unknotted the apron, stiff with the smells of industrial bread, and stowed it without looking up. Merci, Vincent, I muttered, proud of my even tone, though everyone around me, hulking men, tired women, heard it the unspoken. That idiot with his kitchen dreams, of course he wouldn't last. Outside the air was sharper, the street shining with last night's rain. Neon flickered against shuttered stores, Paris waking up. I turned up my collar, hands deep in my coat, shoes splashing through puddles as I crossed the road to catch the first metro. Somewhere below, the city's belly rumbled, oblivious to my collapse. I grew up on the very edge of Paris, a cluster of concrete blocks where everyone's accent was just a little off, and dreams were choked small. My family filled a fifth-floor flat with noise, opinion, and low expectations. My father was a plumber, thick hands and thicker voice, too tired for much warmth. My mother kept us together, sewing, cleaning, never wasting a second. Meals were substance, lentils, stews, thick bread, good food, nothing fancy. By 12, I was already apprenticed to hard work, but when my mother let me stir sauce at the stovetop, all else faded, the scents blooming, butter browned, onions sweetening. My heart beat with the rhythm of her wooden spoon scraping the pot. By 15, I wanted to be a chef. Not for them, only for the feeling that flour, fire, and courage could make something beautiful. My father's response was the first rejection. Chef, he scoffed, as if the word itself was shameful. Hairnet scars, low pay, no future, son. My uncle laughed louder over Sunday's noise. We need workers, not dreamers, Massio. At school, when I mentioned cooking school instead of mechanics, teachers nodded in a sad, tight way. Maybe find a restaurant job, it's very competitive. So I stopped talking. I cooked at home, I applied for kitchens, got ignored, I needed money. That's how I ended up on assembly lines, folding myself in for paychecks, stacking croissant-shaped lumps by the truckload, hiding my ambition in worn-out aprons while everyone, even my sisters, teased me for thinking I could be somebody in the world of chefs. Still, every break I read cookbooks, lined recipe cards in my locker, and spent Sundays cooking for myself. I watched the legends on YouTube, squinting at sources in the blue glow of my phone, memorizing gestures, accents, Bocuse passed, Guy Savoy. I whispered their names under my breath like prayers, even after midnight, after my family's rooms fell quiet. The day I lost the factory job, I was 24, too old by some reckonings to start over. But I couldn't stomach the thought of another shift at the factory. The next morning I pressed a wrinkled chef coat and walked into every brasserie in the Marais, swallowing my shame. Most barely glanced at my hands. A kitchen needs basics. Not dreamers, they said. 6 days into this, I landed a job barely above dishwashing at a cafe near Gare de Lyon. Sweat and steam, burned fingers, shouted orders. It was everything I'd dreamed and feared, not poetic, not pretty. I slept in a friend's spare room with my few coins, catching buses before sunrise, shivering in dark October streets. Each night my bones ached, but I lay awake, replaying the rush, orders called out, the sizzle of duck on the plancha, the bark of "Oui, chef." My heart felt raw but alive. My family stopped talking about my job. When I visited, my father grunted. My mother, hurt for me, still slipped me leftovers in Tupperware. My older brother, with his predictable paycheck, never missed a chance. Learned how to make toast yet, Massio, hope you wash plates better than you did in the factory. Paris was not kind to the underprepared, to the ones without pedigree. I was mocked by younger cooks, laughed at for my accent and thrift store shoes. They called me Usin, factory boy, thinking I wouldn't last the month. I smiled, hands deep in pans, letting jealousy roll off and collecting every bit of real knowledge about sauces, timing, the strange music of a working kitchen. One night the sous chef busted his hand. I was alone at the vegetable station, burnt to hell when chef called over, Usain, taste this. Spatula shaky, I tasted the fish stock, not enough acidity. I added a splash of white wine, a grind of black pepper. He tasted again, surprised. He kept me to close the kitchen, patted my shoulder as I left. He gave me my first pair of real chef's knives. My hands shook on the train home. That was the first small success, the only one I allowed myself to feel, but it gave me hope, a wedge I pried open bit by bit. Years blurred, I started each job at the bottom. When people mocked, I bared my teeth in silent laughter like a stray dog with nothing to lose. I learned to move quickly, to taste everything, to keep my station spotless. I taped new words to my wrist: technique, vision, patience, dignity. Hard seasons followed. I worked 16-hour days, cut my fingers, burned my wrists, collapsed in stairwells between shifts. One autumn I snapped, shouted at the head chef for blaming a ruined sauce on my cut of shallots. I was fired on the spot. I slept in a friend's car that week, the city churning above me. The next day I begged another chef for work, my pride dead but my hands stubborn. She laughed then: "Show me you can use a knife." I did. She hired me on the spot. Gradually there were better days. My name made it to the chalkboard menu. Customers asked for the young chef's dessert. I was promoted, then head of pastries. Each shift my confidence grew, brittle at first. Bishops and gallery owners dined in the same overheated room as travelers and old men. My flourless chocolate cake was featured in a small food blog. I hung the printout inside my locker next to my mother's recipe for pot au feu. Then one summer an investor dined at our cafe, a square-jawed man who liked my tomato tart so much he wanted to meet the cook. He came back. We drank bitter coffee and talked about food. I told him my dream. I wanted to open a small restaurant, nothing grand, just a place for honest food, well made, a little beautiful, a little bold. He laughed the first time, but his daughter was learning to cook, and he admired stubbornness. He offered a partnership. That night on the tiny balcony of my rented room, I cried for all the years spent in the shadows of real kitchens, for the nights scraping together bus fare, for the laughter of the assembly line, my brother, my uncle. We opened Sous Les Sapins on an old street in Oberkampf. I painted the walls a silver green, found battered chairs, sanded tables smooth. It was small, 20 covers, no more. I watched, nervous, as the first customers arrived, watched them peer at the menu. My handwriting, my mother's spelling mistakes, my favorite dishes: duck breast with cherry compote, celeriac puree with hazelnuts, my grandmother's chocolate fondant. We didn't catch on right away, 2 bad reviews, a few slow weeks. Then one cold October night a famous critic wandered in off the street. She ordered 4 dishes, ate in silence, taking notes. I cooked as if nobody else existed. Her review the next morning was exacting but kind. The chef, new to Paris dining scene, brings each plate with dignity, heart and obvious wounds. Recommended for dreamers and skeptics alike. After that people came, slowly at first, then with more certainty. Young couples, old friends, foodies with thick cameras. The restaurant filled. Some nights I worked the line until my hands bled, but I was never happier. In my tiny flat I framed a copy of that review next to my mother's faded recipe card. It was years before I returned to my family's flat for anything but obligation. Even then, the memory of old laughter and ridicule pressed hard against my chest. On the phone, my mother's voice was softer, threadbare. "You will come for Papa's birthday." I hesitated. Do you want me there, Mammons?" "Of course," she paused. "Your father, he still does not understand, but he is proud, maybe, in his way." I hung up before she could say more. I stared at the window, the city shimmering in spring, its lights, its 1,000 opportunities, so far from our old neighborhood. I took the metro across the river, childhood memories sloshing with every clank of the rails. My brother was there first, older, heavier, still clever with insults. His wife barely nodded. Mathieu gracing us with his presence. "Heard you make salads for bankers now." I shrugged. "You should come sometime." He smirked. My uncle, hair thinner, laughed from the couch. "Chef, show us if you're so grand. Cook for us tonight, chef." I agreed quietly. My mother's tense glance told me all I needed to know. Success here meant nothing if it couldn't be tasted. I cooked that night, hands steady, the old kitchen cramped with its flickering light, my mother rinsing potatoes behind me. I made coq au vin her way with my twists, wine thicker, sauce richer, shallots caramelized in duck fat, garden carrots softer with star anise. My father watched, arms crossed, silent in the doorway. When I plated, the room went still, heat steaming from bowls, aromas of earth and sweetness rising. My uncle took the first bite, then blinked in shock. My brother asked for seconds without his usual sarcasm. My father, slowest of all, chewed, set down his fork, met my gaze. He said nothing, but he nodded once. A month later, I received an odd message from the city council, a recognition, they said, of local sons who had built something meaningful. Would I host a small dinner for our arrondissement? For the first time, I agreed without doubt. My father promised to attend, even my brother, bemused, agreed to bring his wife. On the night I stood in the kitchen of my own restaurant, sleeves rolled high, apron crisp, heart drumming with old fears. Outside, my family and neighbors from our housing block sat among rows of wooden tables. Faces I'd grown up with, some that had laughed, some that had scorned me, gathered with visible skepticism among the guests. As the doors opened, I caught snatches of their exchange. "What's this, a menu? I don't eat this stuff. His food better be good." I sent out my favorite dishes. I watched adults who had smirked at my supermarket tomatoes eat in silence, lifting the fork to their lips, eyes uncertain then surprised. My sisters whispered, "Sarah Laws." My uncle winked after licking his plate clean. The women from my mother's sewing circle asked for recipes and took photos for their WhatsApps. Even my brother finally stood in the kitchen after, patting my shoulder. The old rivalry faded for a moment. My father lingered at the last table, silent as people left. He picked at a slice of tart, then pinched my wrist gently, his grip firm and rough. "That's your dream, eh?" he said low, his eyes shining oddly in the restaurant's light. I nodded. "It's good what you built. More than I thought possible." He blinked and for the first time since I was a child smiled, a real lopsided thing. That night after the last customers left, I stepped through the open door onto the street, warm air, shop signs glowing, the city's rumble fading into contentment. I stretched my hands in the yellow light, flexed the ache from the scars and burns of all those years spent reaching something that seemed ridiculous. I stood a long time, eyes closed, the sound of old doubters still muttering in memory, but now just another flavor in the dish, a necessary seasoning for the taste of hard-won pride. I had come home by way of every humiliation, every sleepless night, every laugh behind my back. I had come home, yes, but on my terms, proved not by words, but by the slow wonder on their tongues, by the dignity that no ridicule could spoil. Paris glimmered around me, and I finally belonged.